Hey man, before you even think about forgiving her, before you convince yourself that being understanding makes you stronger, stop. There are certain things a woman does in a relationship that cross a line so deep, you can't come back from it without losing your soul in the process. Because forgiveness, when misplaced, isn't maturity, it's self-betrayal. A man must learn that not every act of grace earns him peace. Sometimes, forgiveness becomes the weapon she uses to repeat the same disrespect again and again. You see, the modern dating world has twisted the concept of forgiveness. It's not about healing anymore, it's about tolerance. And once you start tolerating what breaks your self-respect, you're done. You lose your edge, your confidence, your masculine center. There are some betrayals you must walk away from, not because you're bitter, but because staying would be the slowest way to die emotionally. The first thing you should never forgive is disrespect. Not once, not ever. Disrespect is the seed from which all future betrayals grow. When a woman speaks down to you, mocks you publicly, or disregards your efforts, she's not just expressing emotion, she's testing your boundaries. She wants to see what she can get away with. The moment you excuse it as she was just angry, you've already set the tone. You've silently told her that your self-worth is negotiable. And here's the cruel truth. Women don't respect men who allow disrespect. They exploit them. Once she realizes she can insult you, criticize you, or emotionally belittle you without consequence, her attraction for you begins to die. Forgiving that behavior isn't love, it's submission. And no man can lead or be respected from a place of emotional submission. The second thing you should never forgive is deception. Lies destroy everything sacred in a relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a small lie or a massive betrayal. Once she lies, she's telling you that her convenience matters more than your trust. Women lie for different reasons, sometimes to protect their image, sometimes to manipulate your emotions, and sometimes just because they can. But the moment a man forgives deceit without accountability, he becomes complicit in his own manipulation. Because deception isn't just about words, it's about intent. If she can look you in the eye, claim to love you, and still hide something important, then understand you're not in a partnership, you're in a performance. And she's the director. The hardest pill to swallow is that once deceit enters, trust never fully returns. It only limps along pretending to. Third, emotional manipulation. You should never forgive a woman for twisting your emotions to get her way. This can look like guilt tripping, silent treatment, fake tears, or weaponized vulnerability. It's a subtle form of control, and it's deadly to your peace. A manipulative woman knows exactly how to push your buttons, how to play victim, and how to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. She doesn't want understanding, she wants dominance. The more you give in, the more she learns that her power lies in your emotional instability. A man's peace is sacred, and once a woman realizes she can disturb that peace at will and still be forgiven, she owns you. Forgiving manipulation doesn't make you kind, it makes you predictable, and predictability is the death of masculine energy in any relationship. The fourth thing, disloyalty. If she flirts with other men, entertains attention behind your back, or even emotionally invests in someone else, never forgive it. A woman who seeks validation outside the relationship isn't lost, she's calculating. She's leaving breadcrumbs for her next emotional high while keeping you as her safety net. And the moment you forgive that kind of betrayal, she doesn't see love, she sees weakness. Women may cry when caught, but tears don't equal remorse. Remorse shows up in changed behavior, in accountability, in sacrifice. Anything less is performance. A man who forgives disloyalty tells her that his love can be bought with empty apologies, and that makes him replaceable in her eyes. A woman only values what she fears to lose. Once she knows you'll always forgive, she'll stop respecting you completely. Never forgive public humiliation. When she disrespects you in front of others, friends, family, social media, she's showing the world she no longer values your masculine authority. Public disrespect isn't an accident, it's a statement. It's her ego screaming, he won't do anything about it. The moment you laugh it off, the moment you pretend it doesn't bother you, you send a message that her approval matters more than your pride. And once that's the case, you've lost your power dynamic forever. Men who are truly respected by their women are protected, not mocked. They are defended, not diminished. A woman who loves you will guard your image, not damage it for validation or attention. Forgiving public humiliation means accepting a life of quiet emasculation, and that's something no real man can live with. Then comes emotional abandonment. The moment she starts withholding affection, love, and warmth as punishment, understand that you're not in a relationship, you're in a transaction. You're being emotionally conditioned to perform for love, to earn peace, to fight for what should be given freely. Forgiving emotional neglect is dangerous because it teaches her that indifference works, that she can control your emotional highs and lows like a switch. Love without consistency is manipulation in disguise. The strongest relationships thrive on reciprocal energy, not one person constantly trying to prove their worth. A woman who can turn her love off like a faucet will eventually drain you of every ounce of self-esteem you have left. Never forgive that. Walk away the moment you realize your peace has become her favorite toy. Lastly, using your vulnerability against you. If you ever open up to her, share your pain, your fears, your doubts, and she uses those moments to hurt you later, leave. That is unforgivable, because that isn't love, it's betrayal of the deepest kind. A woman who weaponizes your vulnerability isn't a partner, she's a predator of trust. You should never have to defend your emotions against the person you share them with. When she mocks your past, brings up your insecurities, or uses your trauma to win arguments, she's revealing her true character. That kind of woman will never build with you. She'll feed on your weakness until there's nothing left. Forgiving that doesn't make you wise, it makes you her next victim. A strong man learns that love without emotional safety is a slow destruction of the soul. Forgiveness, in its purest form, is meant to free you, not empower the other person to continue harming you. Too many men confuse endurance with strength. They think holding on makes them noble, when in truth, it makes them prisoners of manipulation. You're not weak for walking away, you're wise for protecting your peace. Every time you allow repeated betrayal under the name of forgiveness, you're teaching her how little it takes to break you. You must understand that a woman only values a man she cannot easily destroy. Boundaries are not cruelty, they're clarity. The moment you stop forgiving what breaks you, you start commanding respect that can't be faked. So here's the truth. The things you should never forgive are the ones that erode your self-worth, distort your identity, and make you question your sanity. Disrespect, lies, disloyalty, manipulation, humiliation, these are not mistakes. They are choices, and each choice reveals a woman's character more than her words ever could. When a woman crosses those lines, she's showing you exactly how little she values the man in front of her. You don't need closure. You don't need revenge. You just need distance. Because forgiveness without change isn't healing, it's denial. The moment you stop forgiving the unforgivable, you stop living in emotional debt. You stop playing the role of the savior, and you start reclaiming your throne as a man who knows peace is more powerful than any love that demands the death of your dignity. Let's go deeper, because most men don't realize that forgiveness without accountability is one of the most destructive habits they develop in relationships. When you forgive her too soon, you rob her of the very consequence that could have changed her behavior. You make peace too cheap. She learns that no matter what she does, disrespect, lies, emotional withdrawal, you'll always come back. You think you're showing love, but you're actually removing any incentive for her to value it. Real forgiveness doesn't come from desperation, it comes from distance. You can forgive in your heart and still walk away. But too many men confuse forgiveness with permission, and that's why they stay stuck in cycles of emotional abuse. The strongest thing a man can do is forgive silently and never return, because walking away with your dignity intact speaks louder than any "I forgive you" ever could. One of the darkest truths about relationships is that once a woman loses respect for you, everything else follows. Her love fades, her loyalty weakens, and her tone changes. You'll feel it before you even see it. Shorter replies, colder eyes, less affection, and most men try to fix this by giving more, explaining more, doing more. But the truth is, the more effort you put into a woman who's already lost respect for you, the less she values you. Forgiving her disrespect at this stage only cements your position as the man she doesn't have to try for. Women subconsciously crave the challenge of earning a man's respect. When you let her off too easily, you remove that challenge, and without challenge, attraction dies. So when she crosses that line of disrespect, you must hold your silence like a sword, not to hurt her, but to remind her that peace with you is earned, not guaranteed. Men also make the mistake of forgiving women who mock their dreams. This might not look as obvious as cheating or lying, but it's just as dangerous. The moment she dismisses your goals, laughs at your ambitions, or plants doubt in your vision, she's slowly corroding your purpose. A real woman aligns herself with your mission. A manipulative one distracts you from it. When you forgive her for belittling your path, you're telling her that your destiny can be interrupted for her comfort. That's how strong men turn into emotionally drained, directionless versions of themselves, because they forgave someone who mocked their fire instead of protecting it. Never apologize for wanting more, and never forgive a woman who makes you feel small for chasing it. You can rebuild love, but you can't rebuild purpose once it's compromised. There's another thing you should never forgive: betrayal disguised as confusion. You'll hear it often. I didn't know what I wanted, I was lost, I made a mistake. But understand something, women know exactly what they're doing when they entertain another man while with you. Emotional cheating doesn't happen by accident, it's calculated, layered, and deliberate. She may try to soften it with excuses, but every choice she made was fueled by impulse, not ignorance. And when you forgive that, you're not healing, you're teaching her that boundaries don't matter, as long as she says sorry with enough tears. Forgiveness, in this case, only ensures you'll be betrayed again, just more discreetly. Because once a woman knows you'll stay no matter what, she stops fearing the loss and starts testing the limits. Never forgive comparison. The moment she compares you to another man, whether it's her ex, a celebrity, or a co-worker, you must recognize that respect has already left the room. Comparison is the silent killer of attraction. It's her way of saying you're not enough without taking accountability for her own dissatisfaction. And when you forgive that, it eats at you. You start competing for approval that you'll never win. You begin to shape your behavior to match her fantasy, and that's when you lose your essence. A real man doesn't compete for validation. He commands it through his presence. The moment you stop being yourself to meet her expectations, you've already lost her interest. Never forgive a woman who makes you feel replaceable, because if she truly saw your worth, she would never make you question it. Now let's talk about emotional chaos. When a woman thrives on drama, arguments, and emotional games, never forgive it. Because chaos isn't passion, it's dysfunction dressed as excitement. Some women have been conditioned by toxic cycles to associate peace with boredom. They'll provoke you, test you, withdraw from you, all to feel something. And the moment you forgive that pattern, you're signing up for an emotional roller coaster that never ends. It's addictive, sure, but only in the same way poison is. Each time you allow her to drag you into her storm, you lose a piece of your stability. And once she knows she can do it without consequence, she'll never stop. Forgiveness only works with someone who wants peace as much as you do. A woman addicted to chaos will use your empathy as fuel for her next emotional fire. Never forgive a woman for testing your loyalty while doubting hers. Some women will accuse you of things they secretly do themselves. They'll project their guilt onto you to justify their behavior. It's manipulation through paranoia, and when you forgive it, you validate her double standard. You teach her that she can lie while demanding honesty, disrespect while expecting loyalty, and disappear while calling it space. The worst part is, it's not about you, it's about control. She's trying to create emotional imbalance to make you prove yourself while she hides behind excuses. But once you recognize the pattern, you realize that no apology can fix a lack of integrity. Never forgive hypocrisy. A man who values truth will always outgrow a woman who lives off deception. And here's a hard truth. You should never forgive a woman who punishes your love instead of cherishing it. The moment she starts taking your kindness for granted, using your love as leverage, or making you feel like your effort is an inconvenience, you must walk away. Because love in its truest form inspires gratitude. When it starts breeding entitlement, it's no longer love, it's power play. Too many men stay hoping she'll go back to who she was in the beginning, but the woman you miss was never real. She was the version she showed you when she respected you. Once that respect dies, so does the illusion. Forgiving her for devaluing your effort means accepting a dynamic where you're always trying and she's always deciding. That's not love, it's servitude. Here's another one that most men overlook: disinterest. When a woman no longer tries, stops showing affection, or gives you cold energy, don't forgive that. You can't negotiate attraction. You can't guilt someone into caring again. Once she's emotionally detached, staying only humiliates you. She may use phrases like, "I just need space," or "I'm confused," but that's code for, "I've already left mentally." And forgiving her for treating you like an option only teaches her that indifference works, that you'll still chase her while she decides whether you're worth keeping. A man who respects himself never fights for love that no longer wants him. He doesn't beg for energy that used to flow freely, because once a woman feels your desperation, she loses her admiration. And finally, never forgive emasculation. If she mocks your masculinity, calls you weak for having emotions, or tries to control how you express yourself, it's over. Because emasculation isn't just disrespect, it's spiritual castration. She's stripping away your leadership, your confidence, your presence. A woman who loves you will calm your chaos, not create it. She will inspire your strength, not question it. Once you forgive emasculation, you're silently accepting that you must shrink to keep her happy. But a man who suppresses his power to maintain peace will eventually resent both her and himself. You must understand this. The woman who truly values you will never try to control you because she feels safe in your strength. Forgiving someone who makes you feel small means betraying the greatness within you. At some point, every man reaches that moment where the pain becomes a teacher louder than love itself. You stop begging for peace from people who profit from your chaos. You stop explaining your worth to women who only listen when they fear losing you. You stop forgiving just to keep the illusion of connection alive, because you realize forgiveness without change is just another lie you tell yourself to avoid loneliness. That's the trap. You forgive to keep her close, but every time you do, she moves further away, because the respect dies a little more. Women don't fall out of love because you failed to love them enough. They fall out of love when you fail to respect yourself enough to walk away. That's the paradox of masculine strength. It's not found in how much you endure, but in how much you refuse to tolerate once you've seen the truth. The man who has learned to walk away when his soul feels disrespected is the man every woman fears losing, because deep down she knows she can't manipulate his peace anymore. When you stop forgiving the unforgivable, you begin to see yourself clearly for the first time. You realize how much of your identity had been wrapped around being understanding. You thought you were showing compassion, but in reality, you were trading your power for approval. You were hoping your patience would make her change, but all it did was make her comfortable in your silence. You start to understand that women test not with words, but with boundaries. Every disrespect is a question in disguise. Will he let me get away with this? And every time you forgive what shouldn't be forgiven, you answer that question with weakness. But when you stand up, not in anger, not in revenge, but in unshakable calm, you give her something she's not used to: emotional accountability. That's when everything changes, because a man who can love without attachment, give without losing himself, and forgive without returning becomes untouchable. He's no longer playing the game, he's the lesson. Forgiveness has been romanticized as virtue, but most men never see its shadow side, the way it turns into self-erasure. You forgive her harsh words because she didn't mean it. You forgive her coldness because she's just emotional. You forgive her flirtations because she's just being friendly, but you don't notice how each tiny cut bleeds you dry over time. It's death by 1,000 emotional concessions, until one day you wake up and realize you're still in the same relationship, but you've disappeared from it. You become a shell of yourself, a man who bends, adjusts, and suppresses, all to maintain peace with someone who finds comfort in chaos. When you finally stop forgiving those micro-betrayals, it's like waking from a spell. The fog lifts, and you realize forgiveness is only healing when it doesn't cost your self-respect. Every boundary you enforce afterward isn't coldness, it's correction. It's you returning home to yourself. There's a certain peace that comes when you stop explaining why you left. You no longer need her to understand that her actions were wrong. You no longer crave an apology that would have been hollow anyway. You stop replaying the past, trying to make sense of something senseless, because the truth is, closure doesn't come from her words. It comes from your decision to stop seeking justice from someone who thrives on your confusion. The moment you accept that, you rise. You start to channel that energy you once poured into fixing her into rebuilding yourself. You hit the gym with purpose. You focus on your craft. You start reading again. You become sharper, calmer, quieter, but deadlier. Not out of vengeance, but because peace has turned you into something rare. A man who no longer needs validation. And that's the kind of man no woman can replace, because emotional detachment built on self-respect radiates a power that makes every manipulator retreat. When you finally evolve past forgiving what's unforgivable, you see the bigger picture, that it was never about her at all. She was just a mirror that showed you where your boundaries were too soft, where your ego craved attention, where your love lacked discipline. The same pain that broke you built you, because pain, when faced with awareness, becomes transformation. You begin to see that the relationship wasn't a loss, it was a purification. It burned away the parts of you that needed approval, that feared rejection, that mistook tolerance for love. The next time a woman disrespects you, lies to you, or manipulates you, you won't need to explode or explain. You'll just walk away, not in anger, but in total peace. Because once you've mastered the art of walking away with silence, you become the one thing every broken person fears, the mirror that forces them to see who they really are. And that's why, my friend, there are things you must never forgive. Not because you hate her, but because you love yourself too much to ever let someone make you forget your worth again. The man who finally learns not to forgive what breaks him enters a new era of his life. It's an era defined not by loneliness, but by clarity. He stops trying to fix women who were never broken. They were just comfortable in chaos. He stops mistaking pain for passion. He stops calling emotional abuse chemistry. He begins to realize that the woman he thought he needed was only sent to reveal how much he had abandoned himself. That's the awakening most men never reach. They stay trapped in cycles of forgiveness because they fear being alone. But solitude isn't punishment, it's purification. It's where you regain your sense of self, where you rebuild the kingdom she tried to destroy with confusion. The man who can sit in silence without craving her voice, who can find peace in his own presence, that's a man who has mastered life. Because he no longer chases women, he attracts peace. It's in that silence, when you're no longer explaining or negotiating your worth, that she starts to feel it. The absence, the power shift, the emotional gravity she once took for granted. You'll notice it, not because she'll admit it, but because her actions will start to reveal it. She'll start liking old pictures, watching your stories, asking mutual friends about you. But you won't react, because you've learned that silence speaks louder than any message ever could. And here's what most men don't realize: women feel absence more than presence. Your distance is the mirror that reflects her mistakes. She may pretend to have moved on, but every confident laugh, every new man, every filtered smile is an echo of guilt trying to silence the regret. You used to beg for her attention, now she fights for your indifference. That's when you know you've won the war without even lifting a finger. You start to notice that forgiveness no longer feels like an obligation. You've outgrown it, not because you're bitter, but because you've healed. Forgiveness, now, isn't something you give others, it's something you give yourself by not going back. There's a quiet dignity in realizing you don't owe closure to someone who shattered your peace. You start to see patterns you missed before, the way she used affection as a weapon, the way she confused your empathy for weakness, the way she loved the version of you that served her ego but not your truth. And with that clarity, your heart hardens, but in the right way. Not into stone, but into structure. You're no longer swayed by sweet words, grand gestures, or temporary remorse. You've learned that apologies are meaningless without transformation. You no longer crave her explanation, because your peace has become explanation enough. When you step into this version of yourself, you become dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in a spiritual one. You've stopped playing emotional chess with people who don't even know the rules. You've stopped confusing connection with dependency. You've stopped giving loyalty to those who treat it like a burden. That calmness you carry now, it's unnerving to people who once thrived on your reactions. Because they can't manipulate what they can't move. You've become untouchable, not by force, but by discipline. You no longer chase apologies, you observe behavior. You no longer explain your boundaries, you enforce them. And that's when you start attracting a completely different kind of energy. Peaceful women, purposeful friends, opportunities that align with your growth. You realize that what you once called loss was simply divine subtraction, life removing what couldn't go where you're going. But here's the most beautiful irony. When you reach this level of self-respect, the same woman who broke you will eventually return, but not to love you, only to test if you've really changed. She'll try to use nostalgia to reopen the door. She'll remind you of the memories, the laughter, the connection, but you'll see it differently now. You'll see how every memory came with a price, how every laugh carried pain behind it, how every I love you was conditional. She'll expect you to crumble the way you once did, to fall back into the familiar comfort of chaos. But you won't, because this time, the silence between her words will speak louder than anything she says. And when she realizes her old tactics don't work anymore, she'll feel something she never felt before: powerlessness. That's when the tables truly turn, because the man she once took for granted is now the man she can't reach. You'll notice how peace starts to feel addictive. At first, solitude feels foreign, like a punishment after the noise of chaos. But slowly it becomes your sanctuary. You start waking up without anxiety. You start smiling without reason. You start feeling grateful, not for what you lost, but for what you escaped. You no longer check your phone, hoping she texted. You no longer scroll through social media comparing your life to others. You've learned that the quiet moments of self-rebuilding are more fulfilling than any temporary validation. You understand now that peace isn't passive, it's power. Because it takes enormous strength to choose calm in a world that constantly tries to provoke you. You used to crave her love. Now you crave your own stillness. You used to chase her presence. Now you protect your absence. And that's the turning point, when solitude stops feeling lonely and starts feeling sacred. This transformation doesn't just change how you see women, it changes how you see yourself. You begin to recognize that you were never too much, too emotional, or too intense. You were just giving depth to people who only swim in the shallow end. You stop apologizing for your heart. You stop dimming your energy to make others comfortable. You stop being the man who tolerates half love just to avoid being alone. And the world starts responding to this new frequency. Your presence becomes heavier, grounded, magnetic. You start to draw respect without demanding it. The same people who once overlooked you now whisper your name with quiet regret. You become living proof that losing everything you thought you needed can be the exact thing that sets you free. Because once you stop forgiving what disrespects your soul, life starts forgiving you for all the times you ignored your worth. And that's when real attraction happens. Not the surface level lust, not the manipulative games, but deep, organic, spiritual attraction. Women can sense when a man's energy no longer bends to please. They feel it in how you look at them, not with need, but with discernment. You're no longer searching for connection out of emptiness, you're filtering it through purpose. You stop trying to get women, and you start allowing them to earn access. You don't chase, you observe, you don't pursue, you attract. Because your peace is now the filter through which everything must pass. The weak ones will call you cold, the manipulative ones will call you distant. But the right woman, the one with peace, empathy, and self-awareness will call you safe. She'll respect your silence, not fear it. She'll crave your energy, not control it, because she'll know she's in the presence of a man who forgave himself by never again forgiving the wrong woman. That's the paradox of evolution. When you stop forgiving people who break you, life starts rewarding you with those who build you. But this new peace comes with responsibility. Because once you've mastered your emotions, you must guard that peace like a fortress. Temptation will come disguised as second chances. Old habits will whisper that it's safe to go back. The same kind of woman who once wounded you will return wearing a different face, a softer tone, and the same patterns. And that's the final test. The universe always sends you the same type of person until you prove you've learned the lesson. The man who fails repeats, the man who sees evolves. Forgiveness is no longer about her. It's about proving to yourself that your boundaries are real. When you choose peace over nostalgia, dignity over desire, silence over drama, that's when you know you've truly healed. Eventually, the game flips entirely. The woman who once thought she could replace you realizes she can't replace your calmness, your leadership, your presence. She might find another man, but she won't find your peace. She might find attention, but she won't find your depth. Because peace is irreplaceable, it's the one thing every chaotic heart eventually craves. She'll look at her new man, And no matter how much fun they seem to have, something will feel missing. That missing piece isn't you, it's the reflection of herself. She only saw through your stability. You were her grounding force, her mirror, her reality check. And now that it's gone, she's back in the storm she once called excitement. That's karma, not punishment, but a reminder that what's taken for granted always feels sacred once it's lost. Over time, the silence she once thought would break you becomes the silence that breaks her. She used to believe your calm was weakness, that your distance was defeat, that your lack of reaction meant you didn't care. But now she sees it differently. Your silence wasn't indifference, it was control. It was the sound of a man who stopped fighting battles that weren't worth winning. She realizes that by not engaging, you preserve something sacred, your peace. And the more she reflects, the more she understands that peace was what she always wanted, but never knew how to create. You became a mirror of everything she lacked: stability, discipline, presence. While she searched for excitement, you became the stillness her soul was missing. But by the time she recognizes it, it's too late. Because silence doesn't just heal the man, it educates the woman. It teaches her the value of what she lost, without needing to say a single word. Your silence now holds power that words never could. It's not about ignoring her out of spite. It's about mastering yourself. Every man reaches that point where he realizes the world doesn't reward emotional chaos. It rewards emotional control. When you stop reacting to women who seek validation through drama, you remove yourself from their emotional playground. That's when everything changes. You become unpredictable. She can't read you anymore. She can't manipulate your responses because you no longer give her access to your energy. That's when she starts to spiral, because women thrive on emotional feedback. When you give her nothing, she starts to question everything. She wonders if you've moved on, if you've found peace, if you've replaced her. And the truth is, you have. Not with another woman, but with a better version of yourself. That's the kind of replacement that no one can compete with. When she blocked you, she thought she was teaching you a lesson. She thought cutting you off would make you chase her, would prove your attachment, would feed her ego. But in the silence that followed, she discovered something she didn't expect. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't fall apart. You simply disappeared into your own evolution. And that's what haunts her, because blocking someone is supposed to make them panic. But when you responded with calm indifference, she realized she had no power left. Her pride won the argument, but her heart lost the war. You became the ghost she created, but couldn't forget. That's when she starts to understand that control doesn't come from manipulation, it comes from composure. The man who doesn't fight for attention becomes the man she can't stop thinking about. Months pass, and she starts to see you differently. You're no longer the man who begged for clarity or closure. You've become the man who embodies both. You carry yourself differently now. There's purpose in your steps, certainty in your tone, and stillness in your energy. She sees it even if from afar. The glow of a man who's healed is something no filter can fake. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. You found your rhythm again, one that doesn't depend on validation or affection. You stopped giving energy to what drains you and started feeding what grows you. You became the version of yourself she always claimed she wanted, but by the time she recognizes it, she's not invited into that world anymore. That's the irony of emotional maturity. It often arrives too late for those who never valued it when it was right in front of them. Your detachment doesn't just heal you, it rewires your entire reality. You start to see patterns in people. You begin to sense energy shifts before they even happen. You learn to read silence better than words, and suddenly manipulation that used to confuse you now looks obvious. You no longer waste time trying to decode mixed signals because you understand that confusion is the tool of the weak. Clarity is the weapon of the strong. You stop chasing women who play games because you've outgrown the need to win them. You understand that attraction built on power and balance never lasts. It always collapses under the weight of truth. Now, you walk with quiet confidence, not because you want to impress anyone, but because you finally trust yourself again. That's the true freedom, when peace becomes your baseline and chaos no longer excites you. And then, one day you wake up and realize you don't think about her anymore. The memories are still there, but they've lost their sting. The emotions have cooled into wisdom. The pain that once consumed you has become the foundation of your strength. You no longer ask, why did she do this to me? You simply accept that she acted from who she was, and you responded by becoming who you were meant to be. That's evolution. You see, life doesn't send people to destroy you, it sends them to awaken you. She was never your punishment, she was your lesson, and once you learn it, the universe rewards you with something better: emotional sovereignty, the ability to stay centered no matter who comes or goes. That's what true masculinity looks like. Not control over her, but mastery over yourself. By this stage, even if she returns, it no longer matters. Not because you hate her, but because you've transcended the version of yourself that needed her. The love you once gave her, you now pour into your purpose. The time you once wasted on arguments, you now invest into growth. The validation you once sought from her, you now find in your own discipline. She'll notice the difference. The calmness that used to confuse her will now intimidate her. She'll see that you've built a life that doesn't include her, yet still radiates fulfillment. And that's the most poetic form of closure, when your peace becomes the answer to every question she never asked. Because nothing unsettles a woman more than realizing the man she thought would wait forever has already moved on without anger, without revenge, without her. But don't mistake peace for weakness. Peace doesn't mean you've forgotten what she did, it means you've forgiven yourself for tolerating it. That's the hardest part for most men to grasp. It's not about letting her off the hook, it's about releasing yourself from the cycle. You stop blaming her for being who she was and start holding yourself accountable for ignoring the signs. You realize that love without boundaries is just self-betrayal disguised as compassion. So you learn to build walls, but not out of bitterness, out of awareness. You stop letting every smile through the gates of your soul. You observe patterns before you invest emotions. You listen to energy before you believe words. And in that awareness, you find something priceless: control. Not over her actions, but over your reactions. As time passes, people begin to notice the transformation. Friends tell you you've changed. Some will say you've become colder, harder, more distant. But they don't understand that what they're seeing isn't coldness, it's focus. You're no longer spreading yourself thin, trying to save everyone. You're no longer pouring into cups that leak. You've learned that not everyone deserves your warmth, and that's okay. You don't owe access to anyone who couldn't handle your authenticity. This new version of you operates differently. You don't seek peace, you create it. You don't chase love, you attract it. Because now you understand that energy flows where attention goes, and your attention is finally back on you. There comes a moment where everything clicks. You look back at the chaos, the heartbreak, the confusion, and realize it was all necessary. Every betrayal, every tear, every silent night, it shaped you. It carved depth into your character. It built resilience into your heart. It stripped away illusions you once mistook for love. You understand now that real growth doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in loss. You had to lose her to find yourself. You had to feel empty to appreciate fullness. You had to forgive what was unforgivable to understand what peace truly costs. And that's the beauty of it all. You didn't just survive her leaving, you evolved through it. You became the man who no longer seeks closure from others because your silence became your completion. As you move forward, something subtle but profound happens. You stop resenting women altogether. The bitterness fades because you've transcended it. You finally understand that not every woman is your enemy, but not every woman is your peace either. You begin to separate the emotional from the essential. You no longer generalize pain into ideology. Instead, you view relationships as mirrors. Some reflect your light, others expose your shadows. The one who hurt you, she wasn't evil, she was unconscious. She didn't know how to handle the depth you carried, the honesty you lived with, or the stability you embodied. To her, that kind of energy felt foreign, intimidating, so she sabotaged it before it revealed her own instability. And now, when you think of her, you don't feel anger anymore, you feel gratitude, because her chaos gave you clarity, her rejection gave you redirection. Her absence gave you access to the strongest version of yourself. You've become proof that a man's greatest transformation doesn't happen when he wins her love. It happens when he survives her loss and learns to love himself more deeply than she ever could. This newfound strength doesn't roar, it whispers. It's in the way you carry yourself now. Slower, more deliberate, harder to provoke. Your silence used to come from confusion. Now it comes from command. You understand that presence is more powerful than persuasion. You don't chase validation because your self-worth isn't up for negotiation. You've learned that real masculinity isn't about dominance or emotional suppression, it's about sovereignty. You've built a fortress within yourself that no woman can breach unless she brings peace as her offering. The same heart that once broke so easily is now guarded by wisdom, not walls. You're not afraid to love again, but this time you'll do it differently. You won't give blindly, you'll observe, you won't react, you'll respond, you won't try to fix anyone, you'll inspire them to rise to your level, or watch them fade from your reality. That's not coldness, it's evolution. You're not harder, you're sharper, not distant, but discerning, because the man who knows his value no longer fears being alone, he fears wasting himself on those who can't recognize it. And yet there's something poetic about what happens next. Life starts sending you tests, disguised as opportunities. You'll meet women who say all the right things, who mirror your peace, who appear genuine, but you'll feel something off. That's your intuition, sharpened by experience. You no longer fall for potential, you read patterns. You no longer confuse attention for affection. You understand that consistency is the truest form of attraction. So you wait, you watch, you let time reveal character, because time always does. And here's the beautiful twist. You no longer fear losing anyone, because you've already survived losing someone you once thought you couldn't live without. That's what makes you untouchable. When a man's peace outweighs his desire, no woman can control him. You're no longer moved by compliments, curves, or connections. You're moved by peace, loyalty, and mutual purpose. That's how you know you've healed, not when you stop feeling, but when you stop settling. As months turn to years, the world sees a different man, but only you know the storms that forged him. You no longer talk about the past, because you've made peace with it. You no longer explain your boundaries, because they're self-evident. You don't need to announce your growth, it's visible in your energy. Your eyes tell the story of a man who's been burned and blessed by the same fire. Every failure taught you endurance. Every heartbreak taught you depth. Every silence taught you patience. You've become calm in situations that used to destroy you. That's what true masculinity is. It's not loud, it's anchored. You're no longer trying to prove you're strong, you just are. You walk differently now because you carry peace like armor. You speak differently because your words come from reflection, not reaction. You live differently because you finally understand that protecting your energy is not selfish, it's sacred. And when the night is quiet, and you find yourself thinking about everything you've been through, you'll smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer controls you. You'll remember how lost you once felt, how much you begged, how hard you tried, and you'll feel proud that you no longer move from desperation. You've mastered the art of letting go without losing yourself. That's the quiet victory. Every strong man eventually earns the ability to love deeply, lose completely, and still rise peacefully. And somewhere out there, she'll remember you too. Not for the things you said, but for the calm you carried. Not for how you chased her, but for how you let her go. Because women never forget the man who didn't beg for their attention, but made them regret losing his presence. You are that man now, the one who turns pain into wisdom, rejection into power, and silence into strength. You no longer need closure, validation, or revenge. Because in the end, you realize something most never do. She was never the loss, she was the lesson,